Please like and leave a heart. Please.
There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vidor Locksmith Show. I'm your host, David Gibson, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry, one interview, one technical presentation, and one technical screw-up at a time. So happy that you guys are all here with me on an amazing Friday. We've got an awesome show set up for you guys, stepping outside of what, normally talking about a lot of drilling stuff, and this time talking about the energy space as a whole. So it's going to be a really, really great show today. Please, if you guys out there would, let me know where y'all are watching from. Love to be able to give everybody a shout out here on the screen before we get started. Also, let me know, did you attend OTC this week? What did you think? Did you get any value out of it? Yes, no? I'm starting to get to the point where, I never really see any new technology per se, but get to see a lot of people that I know in the industry. And that's pretty much where all the value comes from for me, is being able to see everybody in kind of a consolidated area. So I've already started thinking maybe next year I'll just set up a booth, just have some chairs there and just not be selling anything. Just say, hey, if you're at OTC, you want a spot to sit down and kind of hang out and talk, that's where we'll be, and just do that. I don't know. You guys tell me if you guys think that's worthwhile, and if you would come by the booth and say hi, and maybe we'll just give away a whole bunch of drill bits or something like that. I don't know. All right. Looks like everything is working nicely on LinkedIn over here, so that's good. Still not a whole lot. How many? We got anybody watching yet? Let me see this. Oh, they've got some new features here. Oh, fancy. Now you can keep the show running while you're still browsing through LinkedIn. I'd heard of this feature, but haven't actually seen it in practice. But it's there and it's working. It does say that people are watching. Fascinating. It's good to be able to see. Like I said, guys, let me know where you guys watch from. If you went to OTC this week, let us know. All right, we'll jump over to the comment section. And right now, it's just John DeWart. So, John, thank you for tuning in and watching this morning. We do appreciate it. I think I've seen this happen a couple of times before. It takes a little bit for everybody to kind of start trickling in. No worries. But if that's the case, we'll just keep running with the show here. So, let me go ahead and slightly out of practice still on doing all the stuff here. Oh, I will say this. If you guys haven't already, click and follow, right? And if you want to be able to get notifications when we're actually going live, click the little notification icon that's over there on my page on LinkedIn. Do the same thing for our guest today, David Blackmon. Before we get too far gone into this, if you guys want to win a drill bit hat and these little ice cube things from our amazing sponsor, Patterson. I should probably get it up there on the screen. There we go. If you guys want to get one of these, put hashtag PTEN into the comment section now to be entered for a chance to win one of the fancy drill bits, which happens. I finally got one of these orange ones completely made. This is actually the first fully complete one. I've got a whole bunch of messed up ones back there in the back, but this is actually the first one that was completely made and ready to go. So actually we've got two of these now. So one of these I'm keeping for myself, kind of particular to the bright orange color, but hashtag PTEN into the comment section now. We'll give energy for your chance to be able to win. Do we get some more? Oh yeah, here we go. Robin Millen says, good morning from the energy corridor. All right. And Brent's Miner tuned in from San Angelo. All right. We've already got people doing what I asked. There we go. Hashtag PTEN. All right, let's take a moment and hear from our sponsor. All right, and that was from our sponsor, Patterson. Thank you guys so much. Hashtag PTEN into the comment section for your chance to win a drill bit, a hat, and a little ice cube fancy ice cube thing from Patterson. Do appreciate those guys doing that. All right. Yep. See, everybody's doing it. PTEN. There we go. Zawar said he's tuning in from Kingwood. Thanks for being here, sir. Robert McMillan getting in on the action. Mark, there we go. And Umberto says, good morning from New Waverly, Texas. All right, here we go. Everybody's starting to like wake up this morning. It's not that early. All right, let's get on with the show and pull this up. Change some of these things around. There we go. Go back over here. And there we go. Welcome to the show, David Black. David, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's a beautiful day in Texas.
I do agree. All right, so I want to jump straight into it. I'm sure a lot of people have seen some of your blogging, your commentation, your posts on LinkedIn. Very active in that platform. But for those who don't know you, give us a background on who you are.
Yeah, I love LinkedIn. It's a very useful social media. I like it a lot better than Facebook, that's for sure. So I'm an old oil and gas guy. I started in 1979 with Coastal States and finished my career with Lynn Energy in 2016. In between, spent 20 years at Burlington Resources, some time at Shell and El Paso Corporation, always in the upstream sector, except for a year at Tesoro Petroleum. And the last 25 years in regulatory and government affairs, public policy work, communications work. And it was a great way to learn, to get a well-rounded knowledge about the industry and how public policy impacts the industry. And so that's what I write about. I started writing at Forbes, just kind of fell into that role at Forbes.com in 2012. I have been doing it for 11 years now. I also contribute now at the Daily Caller. I have a Substack at blackmon.substack.com where I link to everything I do. And I also have 3 different podcasts I record every week. And one's The Energy Question. It's an interview show that I do. Another is the Energy Transition Podcast, which is a panel discussion show with 3 others from all over the world. And then I do one called 3 Podcasters Walk Into a Bar with Stu Turley and Ray Trevino. That's a lot of fun. And I do it all from my home, the safety and comfort of my home in Mansfield, Texas.
Well, awesome to be able to hear that. So obviously a lot of that of what you're doing is essentially outreach to the greater community, or specifically even into the energy community about energy itself. What's the one thing that you really want, I would say, the general population to know about energy?
Well, what I wish the general population knew is that all this messaging about the energy transition, this fantasy world that's being promoted in the media and by the Biden administration and governments in Europe, is something that's not going to be a smooth transition. May not end up being a transition at all due to resource limitations. And it's going to create a great deal of cost and hardship on your daily lives in the years to come. And we're probably going to have a pretty significant energy crisis in the next few years that will dramatically raise the cost of all forms of energy that you use in your daily lives. Other than that, it's great.
Well, expand on that a little bit.
Sure. So we're being told that we can replace very high density energy sources like what they're calling fossil fuels, oil and gas, natural gas, diesel. And then nuclear energy is an incredibly dense power generation source. And we're being told we can replace all that with incredibly non-dense energy sources in wind and solar power that have efficiency factors of between 15 and 25% if you're lucky, entirely dependent on the weather, don't have a real, true, sustainable battery backup technology in existence today, although, innovators are trying to create one. And it's a fantasy that defies the laws of thermodynamics and physics. And it's all based on a need for an array of what I call critical energy minerals like lithium, like copper, uh, cadmium, nickel, silver, cobalt, the supply chains for which are dominated by one country, China, whose national interests are, largely adverse to our own. And so what this transition is going to end up doing is make the United States and the rest of the Western world really majorly dependent on China for our energy. And if you think that's a good idea, if anyone thinks that's a good idea out there, you need to pay more attention to what's happening in the real world. It's probably not a great idea for our country to be reliant on the nation of China for the energy we use in our daily lives. And I do what I can to get that message out in my writing and podcasting. And I think there are a growing number of people waking up to this reality. I started writing about this energy mineral issue almost 3 years ago now. And just in the last 6 months, I've really noticed a dramatic increase in others in the energy space and in the media, and even in our education system, starting to waking up to this reality that we are facing, and with no good solutions on the table right now. So we're either going to have a change in strategy where energy is concerned and national policy, or we're going to have a massive train wreck in shortage of supply of these energy minerals, causing big power blackouts and inability for Tesla and other car makers to make the batteries for their electric vehicles and things like that. It's a very real issue that more and more people are becoming aware of every day.
Yeah, I think I read recently that Elon Musk had tweeted that young engineers need to stop working on photo sharing apps and more on, I believe it was mining, was his the tweet that he put out there. So is that something that, like, could we keep going the direction, obviously, because there's two different ways to be able to take the conversation here. One is the energy policy, right? And the other one is to keep going the same direction that, somewhat that things are headed right now with being able to do energy transition. And as friend JP Warren put it, it's more of energy addition. So
that's what it's been so far. Yes.
So one of the things I want to ask you, is it even possible, because you said you've been writing about this, is it even possible for us to be able to either innovate our way into better batteries or better minerals or things to be able to have the battery backup for some of these lower efficient energy systems to be able to help to replace or transition away from hydrocarbon? Is it even possible to I guess to innovate our way that direction as opposed to just mining everything in China?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a big believer in human innovation. If you spend your career in the oil and gas industry, you don't have a choice but to be a big believer in innovation and the ability of humans to solve problems. I mean, it's an industry run by engineers and geoscientists who solve problems every day, very hard problems to solve, and innovate their way through it to better results. I mean, we see it in the Permian Basin. Per well recoveries improve every year in the Permian Basin and the other shale plays. And that's entirely through new technology and innovation and better processes and the ability of these people to solve problems. And so, yes, I mean, I think the potential for innovation is there. What we have failed to avoid doing is putting the cart before the horse here. We have these policies being put in place in Europe and the West, the United States, Canada, that are designed to dramatically impact and diminish the ability of the oil and gas industry and the nuclear industry to get their business done. At the same time, you have all these policies designed to subsidize wind and solar and electric vehicles into being, as if money is the only object here. But it's more than money. It's physics. It's mining. It's a massive increase in mining. It's so ironic now that all these supposed environmentalists who have spent their lives opposing every new proposed mining operation around the world are suddenly becoming advocates for increased mining. Bill McKibben, one of the most infamous far left-wing radical activists in the environmental space for the last 30 years, just last week published a 2,000-word essay at Mother Jones Magazine, a communist publication that's been around for a long time in the United States, advocating for a massive increase in hard rock mining because he's suddenly awakened to the reality of the energy mineral question. The International Energy Agency projects that we're going to need 900% more lithium by 2030 and 4,000% more lithium by 2040 than we are producing today. They're estimating we're going to need to triple copper production globally, which would take something like 400 new hard rock copper strip mining operations around the world. Does anyone really believe that Western governments that essentially gave up hard rock mining are going to suddenly start permitting mines like that now in the United States and Canada and Europe? No, it's all going to have to be done in faraway places where consumers in those countries and voters in those countries can't see it happen, because the politicians know that if they permit it to happen in the United States, in our own backyard, or in other Western democracies, those governments are going to get thrown out of office. And so it's an incredible conundrum for renewables and electric vehicles that nobody wants to speak honestly about on the political left. And so we end up with these policies like in the IRA that seek to subsidize the building of electric vehicles in the United States and the import of solar panels and the import of all the wind turbines from China to build out the wind farms. But at the same time, you still have the Biden government refusing to permit new mining operations in the United States. And so we're going to end up dependent on third world countries and China for our energy security. And that means we will have no energy security at all going forward without the innovation you're talking about.
So what is something that people, because obviously a lot of my audience is people within the oil and gas and maybe more specifically the drilling community, what is something that we as a community could start to do to be able to better help ourselves and the general population about understanding the issues at hand here?
Yeah, and that's a hard thing because we don't have the support of the news media like the environmental left does. Typical writer at many of the news operations in the United States, the media outlets are people 1 or 2 years out of college who've just come out of a very left-wing journalism school and been indoctrinated to hate corporations in general and oil and gas companies specifically. And so, when they write their stories, they're perfectly willing to take talking points from the NRDC or the Sierra Club and just roll them into their articles without any critical thinking about them. At the same time, they're not going to do that for the oil industry, and they're not going to take, if they ask you for a quote, they're probably going to edit it in a way that makes you look like a terrible person. And so it's very hard. It's a long way around to saying that the media is arrayed against us, and the people who are the writers and editors and talking heads on the cable networks don't know anything about the subject matter. And so it's very difficult to educate the public in a circumstance like that. The oil industry has, and I complain about it a lot, has been very inept at telling its own story and trying to build any kind of education programs in the school systems. And so what you end up with is ad campaigns that cost $100 million a year by API, that you see the ads on television and you don't even know what they're advertising because they're so focused on, talking about their green credentials. You don't even realize it's an oil and gas commercial. So I don't know. I don't know that there is no magic bullet to it other than you have to continue to engage directly with policymakers. You have to support your trade associations, who are vitally important to the success of the industry in Austin and other state capitals in Washington. And gosh, I wish companies would support what I'm doing, frankly, and what you're doing with sponsorships and a willingness to stand up and say, you know what, we need to support this kind of advocacy for our industry. I do it because I believe in it. I'm not making a lot of money doing it. It would be nice to have some support for what I'm doing as well.
So let me ask you this: is what the industry, because a lot of companies have started, BP in particular, came out and is, moved very much into being an energy company. Total, a lot of any company that had like petroleum or oil in their name has almost abandoned that.
Yeah.
Said that they're energy companies. A lot of people making, putting green in their logo, or just changing their logo in general to, I don't know, hope that people forget, what they were named once before. Is any of that helping in any regard? Or is that more of just a play for Wall Street?
Yeah, and there's look, I know I've known a lot of people in upper management teams around the industry, and I understand the pressures on them. They have a board of directors that's pushing them to do things like this. They have government pressure to get more green in what they're doing. They hire very high dollar advisory firms who give them advice that this is the way you have to go. I mean, my gosh, BP adopted that big green and yellow sunflower emblem in the late 90s. I mean, it's 25 years ago. And then just this year, yeah, you're right, in their first quarter result, or their end of year 2022 results, announced that they were going to refocus on oil and gas to some extent. And that's because the renewables businesses that they've gone into haven't been profitable. They're making their money from producing and selling oil and gas. And so, financials at the end of the day do play a big role. I always commend ExxonMobil and Chevron for not going down that road. I mean, ExxonMobil does have a low carbon business unit that's focusing mainly on carbon capture so far, and Chevron does as well. But those two companies have never tried to pretend to be anything other than petroleum companies. Whereas you have the European companies like BP and Shell, who have different pressures coming from the government and the courts, even in the Netherlands, for example, ruled against Shell and ordered Shell to basically they have to reduce their oil and gas production over the coming years. And so when you're faced with those kinds of pressures, it tends to prod you into moving in that direction. What has amused me and frankly irritated me to a large extent is seeing independent producers of oil and gas in recent years. You go to their website and you see photos of cornfields and cattle and flowers and anything but drilling rigs and tanks and the kinds of things that exist in the actual business that they're in. Because it's more facade than anything else. You shouldn't be apologizing for the business you're in, because the business you're in is essential to the maintenance of a modern society and our way of life. I mean, we can't have the high standard of living we have in the United States exists almost entirely because of the adoption of the petroleum-based economy 120 years ago. You should be proud that your industry has enabled the people in the Western democracies to live the lives we live. Instead of apologizing for it and shying away from it, be proud of what you do, because what you do is vital to everyone's well-being. And frankly, the way we do it in the United States is so incredibly responsible, and has the highest standards for environmental protection on the face of the earth. If you're an American oil and gas producer, you should be incredibly proud of doing what you're doing and not apologize for it or try to pretend to be something you're not. Be who you are and be proud of it. That's probably the best way to promote, to tell the story of the industry, and to, encourage the public to admire what you're doing is if you're proud of it yourself.
So let me ask you this, doing a little bit of looking ahead in your crystal ball here, if the current government policies continue to unroll the way that they are, not approving offshore drilling permits, not approving federal land, being able to, limit the sale of certain types of fuels and vehicles, at what point do you think, or what particular policy might actually be the thing that causes some of the people to actually realize the detriment that they're causing? Like, what might be that initial warning sign that pops up and says, hey, or if we've already seen it, what is it now that says, hey, look, like,
well,
you keep going down this path, you got to be able to see where you're headed, as opposed to right now, it doesn't seem like some people are able to look that far down the road.
Right. And so it's all happening in such an incrementalist approach right now. It's like we're the frog in the pot of water that's being boiled, and they just increase the pressure and increase the cost of everything so gradually that you almost don't notice it. But we're getting to a point in the United States now with the inflation that's happened in food prices and really everything else in this administration. And I think where we're really getting to a point, a breaking point now, is with automobile prices. It's to the point now where the average American really can't afford to buy a new car, period. And only the upper 10 to 20% in our society right now can afford to buy a new car of any kind, and really only about the top 2 to 5% can afford to buy a new electric vehicle, because their cost is 25% higher than the comparable gas-powered car. And this is all due to public policy. I mean, every bit of the price increase in automobiles of the last 40 years has been entirely due to environmental policy. And, you buy a car, and we just bought a car. It has a computer inside of it that controls literally everything. But what it mainly controls is your emissions system, which is a good thing. I mean, it's great that emissions have been cut so dramatically in gas-powered cars. I'm all in favor of it. But the impact is the technology that has to be included in your cars to meet auto mileage standards and emissions restrictions and all these safety requirements that come down from OSHA and other regulatory agencies costs a lot of money and dramatically increases the price of your car. None of that technology is free. And so I think, we're getting to a point in our society where people won't be able to buy a car. And I mean, yes, the current generation of children are being conditioned to be immobile in their lives. And unfortunately, that's very unfortunate for them, because the goal of all this is to make us all immobile in our lives and to live small lives in which we never travel outside a very limited geographic area, and entirely change the way we live. And I do think at some point, anyone over the age of 30 is going to take a step back and look at how they're being told to live, and remember that it wasn't always this way, and start asking why we are doing these things. And for a benefit that the advocates of it cannot identify, okay, other than through fright tactics about climate change and weather, what we used to call weather and now we call climate change, they can't identify a real tangible benefit to doing any of this for the average person on the street. And I do think at some point, probably soon, people will wake up to all this and kind of start rejecting the politicians, most of whom are Democrats, who push this agenda on them. And so I am fairly optimistic about the way the next few election cycles are going to go. And by the way, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I know I'm rambling on.
No. Nobody's
to
tuned in to see me.
Well, so I wrote a story this week about an exchange between Senator John Kennedy and the Deputy Secretary of Energy named David Turk, which happened on Wednesday. And it was an incredibly revealing exchange. And I wrote a story. It was published at the Daily Caller this morning. Urge people to read it, not just because I wrote it, but because this is the key salient point in all of this, is that David Turk, the Deputy Secretary of Energy, essentially endorsed Senator Kennedy's statement that, he has seen estimates of the full cost of the Biden energy and climate agenda ultimately amounting to $50 trillion in cost to the taxpayers by the year 2050, in just 27 years. Now, $50 trillion is such an enormous number that it's almost incomprehensible to the human mind. So I tried to break that down into more understandable bites for the reader. $50 trillion is 135 times the $369 billion in green subsidies that were contained in last year's Inflation Reduction Act. If you divide 135 by 27 years, you get 5, the number 5. So what $50 trillion in cost for the Biden agenda means is that Congress would have to pass 5 more Inflation Reduction Acts every year for the next 27 years. Okay. Now, they passed it once, and it's created all this inflation. It's contributed massively to the inflation in our society. What this means is that you can't tax American taxpayers enough to get to $50 trillion by 2050. You just can't. So it just means that Treasury is going to have to print money every day from now through 2050. And what that's going to do is drastically devalue our currency. And that means out of control inflation. And so if you think costs are high now, just wait a couple of years and see how Biden's energy policies dramatically increase them even more than what you're trying to sustain now in your daily lives. And I do think that reality, once it sets in, is going to create a real, very significant pushback by the average person to this agenda. Once they figure out, it takes a while for people to make that connection because it's all so complicated. But That is the salient point to all this. $50 trillion is more than the gross domestic product for 2023 of the United States, China, India, Germany, and Japan combined. I mean, you can't do that. You can't do it. It's not possible to do it.
I just have to address something real quick. So Gregory says, is this webinar a GOP election advertisement? So,
well,
hold
okay.
on.
So that's a valid question.
I will say this. My show has never been about politics. It never will be about politics. Today's show specifically is about energy policy, energy transition. And our guest today is somebody who's been writing about the subject, who's been in the industry for many years. So we're just discussing the topic. We're not promoting anyone in particular or anything. And if next week or 2 weeks after this, I need to have somebody who writes on the opposite side, I'm more than happy to be able to do that. I just want to be able to make sure that we are open to being able to have these conversations, whether it's within our own industry, because there are a lot of people who are still not completely educated about what we do as a whole. So this is not we're not endorsing any candidates or doing anything of that nature. The closest we've come to this was hosting the Texas Railroad Commissioner debate, right? We had that debate. We would have had a debate on the opposite side of it, but they only ever had one candidate. So there was no point in having even a debate there. So I just want to make sure that clear on what we're having. So I'll allow you to be able to answer that as your response to that as well, David.
Sure. I mean, it's a completely valid question. I would love to be able to say that there are Democrats in Congress who are opposing the Biden plan and who are not on board with this energy transition agenda. I would love to be able to say there is bipartisan opposition to what President Biden is doing. I was able to say that before this year because Senator Joe Manchin was at least positionally opposed to a lot of it. But Senator Manchin left the Democratic Party and now calls himself an independent, even though he still caucuses with the Democrats in the Senate. But it really is a partisan divide on this. And, I don't know any other way to couch it, frankly. You have a partisan divide on energy policy and climate policy. And, that's what I write and talk about is public policy and energy. So it just boils down to that. And, maybe that'll change sometime in the future. I don't know.
So I want to go back to, because we got kind of sidetracked there with Gregory's comment, as far as talking about, $50 trillion to be able to, and that is to be able to transition away from oil and gas as a whole, or like, what is that number to be able, like, what do we pay if we pay for it, if that happens, or if that's what the goalpost is, what is that number like really?
Yeah, so it's to get to this concept called net zero carbon emissions. And net zero doesn't mean there's no carbon emissions. It means you're doing enough on the other side to mitigate the carbon emissions, like planting trees and the other things companies and individuals have to do to receive carbon credits to offset the carbon emissions by carbon producing sources. And you're never going to be able to get to a situation where you don't have any oil and gas usage at all in society. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. And it's not, and I don't think anyone actually believes you can get there without some unforeseen and I suppose possible invention of a perpetual motion machine that many people have claimed to invent it in the past, but never really have. Or there's also the potential sometime in the future for cold fusion and nuclear fusion technology to become viable. And we've seen advances in that in recent months, but it still appears to be a long way away. And so, but it's this whole net zero by 2050 concept moves you to more of a green energy mix, a renewable energy mix, and supposedly electric vehicles, probably in combination with hydrogen vehicles, if that technology can be developed to where it's scalable and sustainable. And so there's a lot of, there's a lot of potential for development and innovation. And I don't want to poo-poo that, because I do believe that will happen at some time in the future. But what we're doing right now is trying to throw this goose that's laid all these golden eggs in the energy space out without having a different goose that's capable of keeping those golden eggs going. And we just can't do this all with propaganda and messaging. It has to be done with real tangible things that are not just doable, but also scalable and affordable. And, otherwise, the only alternative to that is to dramatically diminish the quality of individuals' lives. And that's a different matter entirely. And that's when the policymakers pushing those policies start losing elections.
So one of my follow-up questions here then is, as the projected transition takes place, what about the products that come from hydrocarbon-based energy sources, right? So the things that we actually create from crude oil and things of that nature. How much does that play a role in any of the energy conversations that have taken place?
Well, I think when serious people get together and talk about these things at the big conferences, who actually know about it and talk about it in real ways rather than the narratives and high dollar ad campaigns, there's a serious conversation about it. Because if you just look around the room you're in, literally every bit of technology that's in that room, and probably the clothes you're wearing, and certainly the glasses frames you're wearing, are manufactured with petroleum products. This shirt, every thread in this shirt is made with a petroleum product. You could look around the room I'm in and identified probably 100 different items that are made from petroleum. But people don't think about this and don't really understand. The average person on the street doesn't have a real understanding of that. But when you talk about going out to the future and how this transition is going to proceed, you have to recognize that you're going to have to maintain some level of oil and gas production for many decades to come. The food that feeds the world is grown using ammonia-based fertilizers. That ammonia-based fertilizer is manufactured using natural gas. You can't have it without natural gas, and that's just the way it is. And so this is why you saw a couple of years ago in 2021, the Sri Lankan government was convinced by environmental activists to force the farming community in that country to abandon ammonia-based fertilizers and go to organic food growing. And you had an immediate shortage of food and a collapse in the economy, and the government was run out of office, forcibly thrown out of office, when the public just flooded the palace and forced them out of office. So and the Netherlands is going down this same road, and Canada is to a lesser extent. And it's the problem is that the alternatives, just as in transportation and power generation, there are alternatives that are there, but they're not scalable and they're not affordable. And the trick is going to be to figure out how to make those alternatives scalable and affordable, to where they can really be a replacement for the system that we have today. Otherwise, the alternative is mass starvation in developing countries, and And I don't think anyone is going to be willing to tolerate that.
So is there any policy that you have seen being put into place that could actually be a good, I don't know, example for essentially any part of the world that says, let's take a balanced approach at this and say, look, having other sources of energy is a good thing, and having energy addition, which I don't think anybody is really against, right? But at the same time saying, okay, maybe, yeah, we can reduce emissions like you talked about with the cars, that's a good thing, clean air to breathe, that's fine. Is there anybody out there that's doing this in a balanced, I know that here in the US, maybe that's the thing we always say is kind of like a balanced approach or two-party approach, or just like a logical approach to this that could be looked at and said, okay, can we put aside our differences and look at what our country X is doing, or even a state or a province, and maybe we take that same approach, and that this will meet all the goals that we're looking to be able to achieve down the road and still not, hurt any one individual or group of society?
I imagine there's probably an example out there that I'm not aware of, but I haven't seen that. What's kind of ironic is if you look at Germany, the government in Germany has been forced by circumstances to take a balanced approach, as they had allowed themselves to become overly dependent on Russia, of course, for natural gas and to a lesser extent, crude and coal supplies. And when Russia invaded Ukraine last year, and the Western world started to put these sanctions on Russia and its energy production, and then the Nord Stream pipelines were blown up mysteriously. Germany has been forced to search for ways to diversify its energy supply, and it has moved since 2010 to build as much wind and then later solar energy as it could. But the wind conditions haven't been good on the European continent in the last couple of years, and Germany's a cloudy place a lot of the time, and so solar has pretty limited efficiency factor there. So Germany has been forced to reopen coal plants. They've been forced to, obtain natural gas from LNG from the United States in the form of LNG and other exporting countries. And the result in Germany has been a diversification of its energy suite, even as it shut down its last 3 nuclear reactors last month, which is a weird thing to be doing in the midst of an energy crisis. But in terms of a country that has done all that voluntarily, really striven to have a wide, diversified suite of energy without having to be forced to do it by circumstances, I'm not really aware of that. But I'm sure there is a place somewhere.
Do you think it's even possible at this juncture to be able to have that here in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, we do have a very diversified energy suite in the United States, but it's not necessarily the result of the current administration's policies. Again, it's a result of circumstances, mainly. And like in Texas, I mean, if you look at Texas, just in terms of how we get our energy, in the state of Texas, we're probably as diverse as any state in the country or any country on the face of the earth. We are the biggest by far wind energy state. We're the 5th largest producer of crude oil on the face of the earth. We're the 3rd largest producer of natural gas on the face of the earth. We have a couple of big capacity nuclear power stations. We're leading the United States in LNG export facilities now. We have a rapidly developing solar energy space in the state of Texas now. And so we're doing everything probably as well as anyone else. And as you said earlier, you mentioned it earlier, we've had more of an energy addition than an energy transition so far. And I interviewed Daniel Yergin, who the author of the prize and the new map, back in January, and the term he used for it was energy diversification so far, and that's what's really been happening, and I suspect that's probably what's going to happen, continue to happen over the decades to come, because what we tend to forget about in the planning, and when I say we, policymakers tend to forget about in the planning for all these energy policies amid this transition, is they forget to account for demand growth and population growth. And even as we're developing these alternatives and these new technologies, demand for energy continues to rapidly grow, and the use of energy continues to rapidly grow, and the global population continues to rapidly grow. And so that just means that even as you build all this wind and solar, it's not really even accounting for the rate of growth, much less cutting into the market share of oil and gas and nuclear. And so that's what you end up with, just as a natural progression, is a diversification of the energy supply, which is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Well, we've gotten a whole bunch of comments in here from a bunch of different people. I do want to be able to bring one of them up and be able to kind of get your thoughts on this, especially within the drilling community. This has been a very popular topic, is that geothermal could also, interestingly, be a part of the solution.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on geothermal and the activity that's taking place there because of recent events? Especially, I was in Germany last month or a month prior, and the academic individuals that I was spending time with were saying that there was a lot of money coming not only from within Germany, but the European Union that was in investing and wanting to invest into the geothermal space. And obviously, it's been a very hot topic within the U.S. drilling community and the drilling community worldwide. We've even created the SPE technical drilling section for geothermal drilling as well. So just want to be able to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's a building consensus that geothermal does have a lot of potential here, not just for the generation of energy, but also the storage of somehow, which I don't really understand the dynamics of all that. But geothermal really apparently has a lot of potential for energy storage, to serve as energy storage as an alternative to battery backup. So I'm going to be interviewing actually a couple of experts in that field over the course of the next month, and hope to learn a lot more about that, because it's not a part of the energy space that I have spent a lot of time looking at, I have to admit. And my knowledge about it personally is really limited. But when I hear experts talking about it, they do speak of it in very positive terms. So obviously, I think there's a lot of potential there.
Are you hearing any policymakers having discussions about it? I mean, because to me, it seems like almost the perfect solution, where we still have the drilling and oil and gas community who has that level of expertise, and being able to place a hole in the ground in the right spot, as well as it being a renewable, long-lasting source of energy, which is obviously what you could say opponents to the oil and gas industry might be looking for. This seems like a very viable option. So have you heard any discussion maybe from policymakers who are even trying to bring it up or have that included in any sort of plans?
Yeah, in fact, I know there's several bills that are being considered by the Texas legislature right now that would incentivize geothermal to some extent. Whether any of them are going to pass this session, I don't know, because a lot of this is new to the policymakers, just like it's kind of new on my own personal radar. And it usually takes a while for the policy efforts to catch up with what industry is moving to. And but you're right. When I think about geothermal and look at what it involves, it's very similar to carbon capture to me. It's a kind of renewable green energy space that is very fit for purpose for companies that already have that expertise on staff. I think it's a big reason why ExxonMobil, for example, has focused so much on carbon capture and storage, because they already have the expertise required on staff, and they don't have to go hire a bunch of different people to know how to manage projects like that. Well, geothermal is essentially the same way. You need that same kind of geoscientist engineering kind of expertise that an oil and gas company already has on staff. And so it's very fit for purpose kind of thing for the oil and gas industry. And if you can make it work and develop the technology to where it's, again, scalable and affordable, then it has real potential for a lot of growth, particularly in a state like Texas that has the underground the geology necessary to play a big role in it. So, it does seem to me like a real potential growth area in the energy space here in the coming years.
So I want to be able to, I don't want to take too much of your time up, but I wanted to be able to ask you this for the people that are still watching. What is something, or what's a good source of information for them to be able to stay on top of the changing energy landscape and the policies that surround it?
Well, there's a lot. Some media companies do a really good job of writing and reporting on energy. Forbes is one of them. I'm a contributor there. The suite of contributors Forbes has is really high quality, and they do a really good job, a balanced job, not just pro oil and gas or pro renewables, but a really good balanced job of reporting on it. I think Reuters is a good place to go for this kind of information. Bloomberg, although with Bloomberg, there's a pretty expensive paywall. But if you're willing to pay for the information, Bloomberg does a good balanced job of reporting on this kind of thing. Just as a matter of self-promotion, I think our Energy Transition podcast, we have a very robust discussion about these kinds of things every week, record on Monday morning. And of course, my Energy Question podcast, since last August when I started it, I've interviewed CEOs of 18 different companies, and other experts in the field, and with a focus on the public policy aspects of all this. And I know there's a lot of other folks doing an equally good job in the podcast space too. So I'm not trying to say I'm the only game in town there. So it is, there are specific places you can go. Oilprice.com is another good place to go for information related to public policy and energy. So anyway, there's no shortage of good places to go.
Well, I thank you so much for your time, David. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you think we should be asking you?
Gosh, no, not really. I mean, this was great. I'm sorry I ran on at the mouth so long and got a little political there. Didn't mean to offend anyone, but just the politics of this are just what they are, and I'm not good at mincing words about it.
Well, it's an ever-changing landscape, and it's good to be able to bring somebody on who has been paying attention to it, because obviously, I can see bits and pieces of it, but being able to really focus in on what's taking place on, something that does change day to day, it's definitely helpful to be able to have you come in here and be able to speak to the group for everybody that is watching, and let us know, essentially what the current climate is for the energy policy landscape, I guess you could say. So do appreciate it. All right, before we let you go, we do have to do our drawing for everybody that did enter. We got to give away the drill bit and stuff. So we throw this up here on the screen and want to say thanks. We had 21 different people enter in. So let's hit that drawing button now. This is for ice cube thing in the drill bit. So, and John Young. All right. Well, John, if you would, please send me a DM on LinkedIn if you're still watching, and let me know. You're lucky winner of a drill bit this week. All right. We'll go ahead and take that off. And so special thanks to Patterson for being our sponsor here. David, thank you so much for joining the show. Really, really, really do appreciate it. It was absolutely wonderful insights. And I look forward to reading more of your articles and being able to tune into some of your podcasts that you're doing. 3 a week that blows me away that you're able to do that. I know the amount of work that goes in behind the scenes of being able to do stuff like this. So I hats off to you, sir, for being able to do that and continue writing as well. It's a substantial amount of work there. So I think that's it for this week, guys. I hope everybody had a wonderful week. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Let's try to find the little button here. I can't remember who's on the show next week. Tracy's not in here. No worries. We got another show next week, the week after that. Hope everybody has a safe and wonderful weekend. And as always, know your industry.